One of the more interesting features in the LUMIX system right now is that select models can shoot ARRI Log C through a paid upgrade. The upgrade itself is easy to install, but it's not cheap. When it first came out, it was around $180, and now it appears to be around $250. So the question is it worth it? If you're a working pro using LUMIX in a mixed environment with actual ARRI cameras, I'd say yes. For everyone else, LUMIX already gives us V-Log, and in my opinion, it's excellent. Highlights roll off beautifully, it's detailed without feeling clinical, and it has this buttery, cinematic look that consumer cameras usually don't have. Most importantly, V-Log creates beautiful images with almost no effort. Seriously, time and time again, I line up a shot, press record, and what I see in Resolve is nearly perfect. So V-Log definitely sets a high bar. But ARRI's color science is everywhere in high-end production, and that makes Log C kind of like aspirational. It's very tempting to buy the upgrade so you can try to make your things look like your favorite TV shows and movies. So the real question for us non-pros is, what does it actually look like and how to use it? And that's what we're going to show in this video. Starting off, what does it look like? Well, the simplest way to begin is to compare it directly to V-Log in the same scene and the same exposure. So here's a good baseline shot. We exposed both clips the same, brought them into Resolve, and applied each camera's log to Rec. 709 LUT. Right away, I'm going to be honest, I prefer V-Log. To my eyes, it looks more pleasing and more cinematic. The biggest difference is contrast, so Log C comes in way punchier. V-Log has less contrast, which means the shadows and highlights feel less stretched apart. It also holds more detail in the darker areas, and the highlights feel smoother and more natural. Now that contrast also changes the mood, which is really important. So notice my shirt looks darker and punchier, and the lines on my face look more pronounced. If I'm being uncharitable, I'd say that punchy tone can actually start to look a little bit smartphone-ish. Color-wise, Log C has differences when compared to V-Log. In this shot, we're biased more towards green, but honestly, those types of differences are less important to me because corrections are usually quite easy to make. Still, part of the ARRI look is its colors, so I tend to be more concerned about hitting proper white balance and letting the colors be. Now, this is just one comparison shot, but that punchy look showed up over and over again in all my tests. And if this is where we'd stop, I'd say V-Log honestly wins and you should just skip the upgrade. But here's the catch. Simply slapping a Rec. 709 LUT on the node is not really fair to Log C because that's definitely not the intended workflow. See, like a lot of high-end tools, Log C wants a little bit more structure, but if you give it that structure, it can look honestly incredible, be more flexible than V-Log, and it's actually easier to work with in most cases. So the big question is, what is that workflow? Well, it's two main things. First, we have to understand where the output transform belongs, and then second, we're going to use a workflow called log to log. So step one is the mindset shift. So the destination transform to Rec. 709 should happen last as an output transform, not as just another node in the middle of your grade. So think about the typical log workflow. You start with a flat desaturated clip, then somewhere in your node tree you apply a LUT or CST color space transform to convert your log into upward space like Rec. 709. The transform, in other words, ends up mixed in with everything else. Now, most of us, myself included, do this without really thinking about where the output transformation should live. And it turns out with Log C, the first step is don't put that transform in your node tree. We put it in the output. So there are two ways I recommend we do this. First, the project level output LUT. If you're not shooting ProRes, the simplest approach is to apply an output LUT in the project settings. Now, when we do that, everything in the timeline gets output through that LUT. Now, of course, the limitation here is obvious. If you're mixing footage, say S-Log from Sony or D-Log from a DJI drone, those clips will also get hit with the same LUT and they'll look completely wrong. So this option works best, of course, when your timeline is basically all Log C non-ProRes. The second option and preferred way is to use ARRI's supported workflow, which is to shoot everything in ProRes. And yes, shooting in such a heavy codec may feel a bit snobby, but if you can tolerate the bigger file sizes and the more limited frame rate and recording options, the ProRes method has a huge advantage. See, here's the win. When we shoot ProRes Log C, your files are all tagged with metadata that Resolve uses in DaVinci YRGB Color Managed mode. In short, Resolve automatically applies your desired output transform to only those Log C clips. So now you can mix Log C with other log sources, and your Log C footage gets the correct base transform without wrecking everything else. Now, weirdly, this doesn't work the same way with V-Log. No matter ProRes or H.265, V-Log never gets tagged properly, and honestly, I'm not sure why. Now this gets us to step 2, log to log. Now before we do anything, we need the proper LUTs. So we're gonna go ahead and download the Log C LUT package from ARRI's website, install and resolve, and you'll end up with folders like this. I've linked a setup video that shows the exact steps in the description. This part is just copying LUT files into the right place. Now the key concept. The LUTs in the log to log folder are designed to work on unconverted log footage. In other words, they expect the clip to still be in log C, not already transformed to Rec 709. And see, this is why we move the output transform to the output node. Not only does it clean up our node tree, but it unifies all clips in a single setting as we saw before. Now the second key step, apply the log to log LUT either as a single node along with basic corrections, or if you're doing a multi-node grade, apply it as the last node in the tree. So the order becomes do your exposure, balance, and creative adjustments in log, then apply the log to log LUT, and only at the very end will resolve handle the output transform and the steps we performed before. Now it sounds a little bit complicated, but once you see it in action, it's honestly really straightforward. So let's jump into resolve and set this up step by step. All right, so first things first, we need the ARRI LUTs. We get them from the ARRI Look file site here. There is a link again in the description that takes us to a video that helps you set up so you have the same outline that I do in terms of folder structure. And I think this is really important because there are two main ways that we're gonna see how you can apply these LUTs, and having the separation and organization in this format that we see right here, I think is really useful. So in other words, we're gonna end up with a couple folders within our main ARRI folder, and the two that we really care about are log to log and Rec 709. So first, then we want to talk about where do we actually put our output transform, and the idea being, of course, we want to do that as the last step. I have 3 files here. The first one is ARRI Log C3. This one is shot in Apple ProRes. The second is a vlog shot, also in ProRes. And then finally, I have an ARRI Log C, but this one was not shot in ProRes. It's just H.264. And hopefully you're kind of seeing this difference immediately. The one that was shot in H.264, there's no LUT applied, and it is clearly still in log format. However, the one that was shot in ProRes definitely is no longer in log, but there is no LUT applied. And this magic is happening because we have turned on, under color management, DaVinci RGB Color Managed under color science. Further, the output color space that we're rendering to then is selected right here, Rec 709. It's almost certainly gonna be what you wanna use as well. And this is the magic sauce, right? So this is creating a transform to the appropriate Rec 709 color space without us needing to do this within the node tree. There are other ways that we could do this. For example, we could do the output lookup table as we mentioned earlier. The problem with this is this applies it to all clips that are in our timeline, and we definitely don't want that if we have any clips from other camera types. The beauty of the DaVinci RGB Color Managed mode is also then that it applies it to the ProRes. And I say beauty, but it's also somewhat of a limiting factor because, again, if you're not shooting ProRes like this clip was, even though we're ARRI Log C3, it's not actually getting the appropriate output transform. So it's really nice that it does this transform for us because it makes our node tree much simpler. But the downside is you have to shoot everything in Apple ProRes. Just to quickly put one final point on this, again, here we have an Apple ProRes shot, but this one was shot in Vlog, and this is a good example of where the time savings of this workflow come in. So if I wanted to put a film look that are just built in Resolve, I would usually transform to Rec 709, then I'd apply a CST to Cineon Film Log as my output gamma, and then finally I would apply one of those LUTs to my look. And this gives me a nice sort of film-like look, but it took me 3 nodes to get there. Whereas with the ARRI workflow, there's 2 main ways that we can do it. We can use the automatic output transform when shooting ProRes, and then we're going to use the log to log workflow, which we'll see in just a second, or we can just use one of the Rec 709 LUTs to do the transform to Rec 709 and the look for us in one shot. Now, I don't really recommend this because I think the results aren't quite as refined and detailed, but if you do have non-ProRes shots, it is an option for us. So for example, I could apply this Film B look just by dragging this Rec 709 LUT over to my footage. And again, it converts it to Rec 709 and applies the look in one shot. So it's very convenient, but again, I like the log-to-log workflow. So what is the log-to-log workflow? Well, we've already done half of it. We've set up Resolve so it has a proper output transform. which means that every clip that is in our timeline that is shot in ProRes, ARRI Log C, is already getting the Rec. 709 LUT applied to it, right? The output transform. So then it's just a matter of performing the actual color corrections that we want. It's incredibly simple. But the beauty is, I think the results that we get are really, really refined and nice. And so I'm going to give a couple examples here, but just to start off with this one, I think this is a good example of why this is such a nice workflow. So here we have a very simplistic shot in that it's just light coming in from a window. And you can see here we have these beautiful highlight roll-offs. We have dark areas, but we're not actually like crushing the blacks. They don't feel like crunchy, in other words. And everything just has this sort of beautiful filmic smooth roll-off to it, which is honestly very similar to how Vlog operates. But the way we actually got this then is that we did it in 2 steps. The first is that we have a shot that was shot about a half to a full stop over. I'll talk about why in just a minute. And then we applied a log-to-log look to it. In this case, I chose, I believe, let's see, we got here, Film B. So in the log-to-log folder, we have a bunch of different LUTs we can apply. We just drug Film B onto this. And then for the actual corrections that we make, I just applied some lift, gamma, and gain corrections. And with those 2 really simple steps, in this case, spread across 2 nodes, but we have this very beautiful, I think, cinematic looking image with almost no effort. So let's talk about that for a second. Like, what is the workflow to get this? So I'll take an image that starts with a base like this. Let's actually clear off this node and start with our base node here. I will shoot a little bit brighter. Again, I'll go to the full description of this in just a second, but I'll shoot a little bit brighter and I'll do this exact series of steps for pretty much every one of the shots. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop contrast down so that the darker parts of the image start to match the mid blacks. So in other words, I'll start with this and I'm kind of looking at this dark area here, and I'll just drop this down so that they start to match this for right here. Then I'll take lift, gamma, and gain and just usually push them down a little bit. So lift, I'll move down until we start to drop in the shadows that I want. For gamma, because we shot this scene very bright, I'm actually going to remove that 1.5 or so back to get the look that I want. And then finally, I'll take a little off the top on gain. Then I will take the look that I want and I'll apply it to my image. So some of my favorites are these Film A, B, C, and D. They're all a little bit different in terms of strength, but I really like Film B for these sort of indoor shots. I'll just drag the LUT over, and now without any further corrections, we have a shot that looks like this. Now what I will do is I will treat the contrast as sort of like a master gain. So I will turn this up or down depending on how strong I want this sort of like look to be. If I want it to be more dreamy and less contrasty, I'll drop it down. If I want to get a little bit more punch, I'll push it back up. Let's take a look at one more example. So here we have another example of Kitty doing what he does best. And let's just do that same workflow again. So I'm going to start by dropping contrast down. Again, I'm just looking to create evenness between some of the deepest blacks and lighter blacks. Then again, I'll drop lift down to where I start putting the shadows back where I want them. I'll remove that extra stop of exposure, and then I'll just take a little bit off the top with gain, and I'll grab the look that I want. So again, Film B looks great. And then I use contrast again to maybe bring a little bit more dynamism into the shot. And we end up with something like this. Now again, what I will do is small tweaks. If I feel like his face got a little bit too dark, in this case, drag up my lift a little bit more. And that's basically it. That is the workflow that I use. I've been doing color grading for years. I'm not an expert, but it is almost shocking how consistently that particular workflow is for me. So just as a few quick examples then of what's possible using this very simplistic workflow, using the ARRI Log C. So here's a very basic shot where we just have some garage lighting. And I think it really, really sort of sings to how easy it is to use ARRI Log C with some of these very simplistic LUTs that we have. Now, a few quick notes about this. I mentioned before that I was shooting bright. There's a reason why I do that. Now it's a little bit subtle here, and hopefully this is going to come through the compression. But what I have noticed is that if I shoot a little bit overexposed, so usually half a stop to a stop, not going crazy, but I find that the final image has more pleasing colors. So this is a good example of that. So here we have the flesh tones, you can see them. This is the exact same lighting conditions, just a few seconds apart. This shot was shot close to what optimal exposure would be, maybe a little bit high. And this shot was about a stop and a half over. So you can see it's very bright in here. You saw this with the earlier shot that we saw right here, right? We started off quite bright. And the reason why I do that is because sort of similar to how Sony S-Log is with the Cine EI workflow, where you literally shoot usually about 2 stops over and then bring it back down in post. There is something about ARRI Log C that feels like it responds better to a bright image that gets taken down. And I specifically find that works best when it comes to flesh tones. So there's something about the sort of recovery in the shadow areas that just feels more pleasing to me. And it's just easier to get a better looking image. So it's a subtle effect, do experiment, but it's something that I found. Finally, just a few quick notes about overall color science. So I have found the way the colors react in ARRI seems to be more, I guess, sensitive to brightness and saturation than V-Log does. What I mean by that is, in the shot right here, let me move our LUTs. And you can see here that off the camera, the shot looks like this. So you do start to get a ton of saturation just from the Rec. 09. And this is where V-Log I find differs a little bit, where it's a little bit sort of less punchy and contrasty. But it's kind of the nice thing about the ARRI Log C, because if you want something that's punchier just out of the gate, you get that, but then it's very easy again to use our workflow if we want to tone things down. And so just a few A/B comparisons. Here it is off the camera. You can see the greens are really beautifully saturated. And then I just apply one of my LUTs in a little bit of downgrading in the lift, gamma, gain to just tone it down a little bit. And here's one last shot. Beautiful green colors, but off the gate, we looked a little something like this. I just find that the gradability, again, log to log, is really nice. So yeah, that's a good look, hopefully, at some of the quirks and characteristics of ARRI Log C, at least as it is in the LUMIX cameras. Beautiful off the gate colors, but I think if you have a little bit of a workflow, particularly when it comes to overexposing and doing what we saw here, I think it's a beautiful results. So there we have it. Log C requires more setup, yes, but the results are, in my opinion, absolutely worth it. So to summarize, V-Log is wonderful for creating those smooth and creamy cinematic shots, but I often find this a bit limiting when I want something more punchy or colorful. Adding Log C makes obtaining those types of looks much easier, and it does so in a tasteful and honestly professional way. In short, having 2 log profiles is definitely better than 1. I still shoot V-Log, but I find myself gravitating towards Log C more and more. This is mostly for the look, but the time savings of Resolve Color Managed mode, along with the workflow, are really starting to close the deal. If nothing else, it would be awesome if more camera systems adopted the log-to-log workflow. So hopefully you now have a better feel for what Log C looks like, and if you have it, you can use it most effectively. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next one.